This last video is going to deliver the promised and dreaded intro to the Tidyverse. Here we are going to need a new package. If you haven't already installed Tidyverse on your computer, you'll need to run this, get rid of the pound sign here and run this line of code. I've already done it, so I'm just going to run the libraries to get them open and import the data set that we have continued to work with here. So the Tidyverse is actually a collection of packages that has, so when you just loaded that, it loaded like several packages in, like tidyr, dplyr, and I don't even actually, ggplot2 is actually one of the Tidyverse packages. I don't know all of them off of the top of my head, but there are several in there. And a lot of people, find these more intuitive and easier to use than some of the basic R functions. I am not one of those people, but it may speak to you. So an important operator that we've worked with so far has been that assignment operator, the less than and dash to create objects in basic R. Tidyverse makes use of what is known as the pipe operator, which is used to string together multiple commands. And it looks like this here, percent sign, greater than sign, and another percent sign. The keyboard shortcut for the pipe operator is Control-Shift-M in Windows. So if you just Control-Shift-M, it'll pop that in for you. And Command-Shift-M on a Mac. The literal translation of this pipe operator when you're like reading a line of code would be something like and then. So it works with commands like select and filter to subset data, just like we would with either of the two methods that I showed in the subset setting video within basic R. You're going to start with the data frame name and then select, and then you're going to give it a list of variables to select to create this new data frame. And then with your pipe operators, you're going to pass this to this next line and tell it to filter party ID 3 by Republican. So that's only going to select the cases where party ID 3 is Republican. You can also string this, add another pipe operator and this NA omit to exclude NAs if you wanted to for some reason. I can't really think of a good one right now, but it was included in the example that I was looking at about the Tidyverse. So that's how to do it if you want to, but be very cautious in using it because it can cause you problems later. So if you run this here, it's going to actually spit the data out into the console, but that's the only place it is. But it's just going to give you this smaller data frame of these three variables that we're talking about here. And only the cases where PID3 is Republican. So actually to create a new data frame, you still need to use the assignment operator. So you would give it this like new name here and just copy and paste that part from above. Don't run this, even though it's here. That was just, if you're going to pass it through to the NA omit, you need that there, but since we're not going to do that, make sure you're not running the pipe operator. You're going to get an error. So if we run this, now we see we got this new data frame over here of 314 observations. And if you remember from the subset video, that's what I had. May not be what you have, but it's what I had as far as Republican observations. And then just the three variables. So for recoding, we use the command mutate, and sometimes there's a lot of different ways out there, and this is why I think the Tidyverse is super confusing. Sometimes you'll see examples where they're using recode, and sometimes mutate, and sometimes they use case when, and sometimes they use if else. The one time that I was demonstrated how to do this, We used case when, which does, it does, I'll admit it does simplify the if-else statements just a bit, but I'll kind of walk you through this and show you what's going on here. So you still need to use the assignment applicator to update the new data frame with your new variable. So in order to actually add the variable to the data frame. So you're going to just say my data and the assignment operator, and then you start with the my data again, so that you can tell it what the starting point is. So here you're naming the new data, which we're going to keep it saying my data, but then you have to tell it after the assignment operator as part of the function where to start. So my data, and then the command is mutate, and here we're going to tell it first what we want the new variable name to be. And then we just use this equal sign, not the double equal sign, because think of this as where the assignment operator would be if you were only doing the if-else function in basic R. The case when function, so I guess it kind of vectorizes if-else functions, so you don't have to keep passing it two arguments, a true and a false. So old variable name, it still reads like an if-else function, but this case when just allows you to stack multiples on top of each other. But here we only need the variable name. We don't need the data frame name because we've got that up here. When it equals 1, then, so the tilde here reads as then 0. If you look in the code book, the negative numbers, we're not going to want to keep those. We're going to want them to become NA. Responses 1 through 3 are all some form of didn't vote, because, oh my God, I forgot to tell you what we're recoding here. We're recoding the variable for voting in 2020 elections. So 1, 2, and 3 are all some form of didn't vote. Like I was going to, but I didn't, and I wasn't planning to at all, and I don't remember what the other one was. So we want 1 through 3 all to be 0 or didn't vote, and the only one we want to be 1, which is voting, is 4, because that's the only one that actually says that you voted. So original variable equals 1, then 0. If it's 2, then 0. If it's 3, then 0. And then if it's 4, then 1. And this time we don't have to add that last argument of NA. It just knows that when you stop, anything that you don't specify as getting a value here becomes NA. So I guess one advantage is you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry as much about how many of these close parentheses are here. You still do need the one for case when and the one for mutate, but you don't need, 4 of them for an if, like you would if it was an if-else function. So we'll run this just so you can see what the original data looked like. We had a -1 and a -9, and then these 1 through 3s that were some form of didn't vote, and then the 4, which is vote. Then run the code for the recode, and you'll see that this, I don't know if you noticed or not, but we did add a variable to the data set there. And then if you run the table on the new variable that we created, you see we've just now got a dichotomous variable of the same 794 people that originally said that they voted, and then 161 people that said in some form 1 through 3 that they didn't vote, and then these dropped off as NAs. So this is what I meant about being able to stack multiple variables within this mutate function by using this case when. So you've got basically the same exact function, only before we close the parenthesis for the mutate, we're going to add another comma, and we're going to start a new line for female. say we want to recode female into, which we've already done. So this time, this 240 is not going to jump because we've already done that. But we're going to use gender and create this variable for female. In the case when gender equals female, then we'll give it the value of 1. In the case when gender is male, we're going to give it the value of 0. Again, anything else becomes NA, although we don't have to explicitly tell it that. So we know that we've been successful in running this because we don't get any error messages, and we get, as long as we see this, well, it looks like a greater than symbol in the console, that means that the previous code is run correctly, even though we don't add a variable over here. So, I mean, you can continue to add variables, as many as you need to when you're recoding. That is as in-depth as I'm going to get with the Tidyverse for now, since this is kind of like all of the stuff that we've covered so far, subsetting and recoding essentially. There are tons of videos out there on YouTube that work in Tidyverse, so if you want more in-depth, if this seems simpler to you and you want more in-depth, to take a more in-depth look at this, there's tons of it out there. The videos that Tom Glynn from the Data Scientist Library posted that I put in week 1 module, he uses the Tidyverse. So again, if you want more a more in-depth look at Tidyverse, those videos might be useful for you.